Hi, this is our presentation on China's Online Games Ethics Committee rejecting many titles. In this video presentation, we're going to have a look at what the committee is, some examples of censorship, then we're going to speculate on CCP beliefs within the committee, and we're going to have a look at who makes decisions. Then we're going to share our opinions on video games as a form of free speech, and compare it to the West, and then we're going to have a look at some rights of privacy. After that, we're going to have a look at China's influence on the gaming industry, and then again share our opinions on accountability, safeguarding versus freedom of speech, and how we would go about censorship.
So what is the committee and why was it found? China's Online Game Ethics Committee was founded in 2018, with their purpose being to approve new video games for release in the Chinese market. The committee was established under the guidance of the Publicity Department of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, i.e. the CCP. The committee is made up of experts and scholars from various departments and units, such as news media and universities. The establishment of the committee came 9 months after a regulatory shake-up led to a freeze in approvals of game licenses in China. Thus, it seemed like progress towards game licenses starting to resume approval and for new games to release after such a long break. However, of the 20 games the committee first looked at to see if they should be published, 9 were outright rejected, and the other 11 were advised to make changes if they wanted to be approved. China has core values it holds dear, and this is why the committee was founded. The government wants the games that it licenses for China to be in line with these values. The committee also wants sufficient protection for minors and to promote healthy development of the Chinese game industry. So next let's talk about how decisions are made and examples of these. It's important to note that these decisions have not been officially released to the West, but are found on Chinese gaming forums. The decisions which have been made on the 20 game titles initially reviewed by the committee were based on the following causes: overly revealing female characters, rank-based rewards, distorted concepts of history and culture, inharmonious chat rooms, game missions including fraud, blood and gore, and vulgar content. I believe that not approving a game due to some of these factors is an ethical issue. In particular, inharmonious chat rooms and distorted concepts of history and culture infringe upon free speech, in my opinion. Other factors can be argued as a safeguarding choice, and a strict dislike from the government and the committee of the appearance of inappropriate content in games. These factors may not be ethical issues themselves, but I believe that denying games due to some of these unimportant factors, where an age rating can be a better solution, is ethically wrong for the game companies and the people who have worked for countless hours just to be denied on trivial grounds such as rank-based rewards. So does the committee propagate CCP beliefs due to their relations to the CCP? As previously mentioned, the committee was established under the guidance of the Publicity Department of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China. The Publicity Department is generally in charge of spreading CCP ideology, creation and dissemination of propaganda, and enforcing media censorship. The Publicity Department's operations have many ethical issues, including not allowing free speech through their censorship and trying to essentially control their citizens. This raises questions of whether through their guidance, the committee is trying to push the agenda of the Publicity Department, and whether the committee is acting ethically wrong in doing so. There is no clear evidence of this, as the committee does not release much public information, but I believe it is a strong possibility, and one that you must be aware of.
Now to talk about who makes a decision and what makes them qualified to be able to make these decisions. So the committee consists of PDCPC members and experts who specialise in young adult problems and online video games. The PDCPC is the Publicity Department of the Communist Party of China. The members are said to have come from professional backgrounds such as universities, news media and industry associations. We can theorise who these members may be. It would be reasonable to expect a child psychologist and a medical practitioner to determine the effect these games have on child brain development, but also their physical health. It would also be reasonable to think the members come from different backgrounds and industries, so they all have a different outlook, which is positive because you need opposing voices to achieve the best outcomes. Now, based on this theory alone, it gives more confidence if the decision came from them, rather than the government alone. But if the committee was populated just by people from the industry or government, then the decisions they would take would normally reflect a positive outcome just for them and them only. No other information has been released about the members of this committee, and no official source can back up which bodies are actually part of it. Therefore, we cannot assume the committee is qualified to make these decisions based on the fact that we don't know who's actually part of this committee and their intentions.
Let's now talk about video games as a form of free speech. It's first important to define what free speech is. One definition I strongly think is correct is that free speech is the right to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds by any means. This definition was made by Amnesty International, by the way. Let's consider video games under this definition. Video games allow information to be received and imparted, and I believe would fall under this. There was a case in the US where the same opinion was shared. In the Brown vs. Merchants Association case in 2011, the US Supreme Court explained that video games are a form of expression entitled to First Amendment protection, an amendment which concerns free speech. So I think the Online Game Ethics Committee does violate free speech through some of the decision making, which is an ethical issue. However, other decisions, which are based on factors such as drug use and violence, are not an issue of free speech, and may not be ethically wrong. Adding to the previous slide, using Article 10 of the Human Rights Act as an ethical code, I believe video games come under the Works of Art and Internet Clause and are a form of free speech similar to in the Brown vs. Entertainment Merchants Association case.
Censorship in the West is not as stringent as it is in China. Western censorship focuses mainly around censoring content by providing age limits so young audiences don't have to access violent content. There are relatively few games in the West that have been outright censored or banned, that is in comparison to China. Only 6 games have ever been banned in the United Kingdom. In comparison, China has banned almost 60 games from live streaming services alone. Games that have been banned in the UK have mostly been due to their extreme violence. An example of this is Manhunt 2. It was almost fully banned and had to release a year later in the UK. However, as far as we can tell, the only game to ever be fully banned and still not be able to be accessible to this day is Omega Labyrinth Z, and that is due to its suspected links to paedophilia. This is in stark contrast with China, where games are banned for ideological reasons as well as for vulgarity. An example of this would be Paradox Studios' Hearts of Iron game, for depicting Tibet as not being part of China. The Chinese government deems this kind of content to be destabilizing, and thus they ban it outright. The only real example of non-obscene censorship we could find in the West was the censorship of Wolfenstein in Germany. Germany has obvious reasons why it does not want to portray Nazism in any way. The game would have broken certain laws in Germany. Therefore, to be released to the German public, it had to be edited. Swastikas and other references to Nazism had to be cut from the German release. The German government could have completely banned the game, but in providing this measured response, they were able to uphold the developers' freedom of expression. We believe if this same situation had occurred in China, the outcome would have been completely different, and the game would have been totally axed.
The view in the West is there is a right to privacy and to control data about yourself online. And China, as shown in a New York Times article, instead does not provide this privacy online, and instead monitors the user's activity through a facial ID software and national ID cards, mainly for the purpose of restricting game usage for under 18s. This is not too dissimilar to proposed laws on age verification in the West for 18 plus content, but has the main key difference that to access this content in the West, it does not require you to provide private biometric and facial data. And while the overall reason for this level of monitoring is about safeguarding, the government agencies that manage this, again, act like a black box, which results in little public oversight to make sure this is the only way that private data is being used.
China has a lot of power and influence over the games industry. To understand why this is the case, it's important to say that the percentage of Chinese gamers in the gaming community is about 25% of the total, according to data from a recent study. This means the Chinese government has a huge amount of leverage over the gaming industry. We can see this in the banning of a Hong Kong esports player after he expressed his support for the 2019 Hong Kong democracy protests, and he was banned by Blizzard. The banning of the player is an extreme move and shows how far a gaming company is willing to go to please the CCP.
Now to talk about how in this committee no one is accountable because the members are unknown and we can't see the decision process. So this raises a large ethical problem. No one can actually be held accountable for the decisions they make, leaving us really at the mercy of the committee. They can make any decision they want with no repercussions whatsoever. There could easily be an abuse of power and there's nothing we could do to actually stop this. There's no independent body used to challenge any of the ideas or decisions that they put through. I would say this is very highly unethical, as the responsibility falls to no one and the audience has no say in the decision process whatsoever. Furthermore, the decision process is not given. There are no guidelines we know of or specific detailed process that they actually go through. They give no formal reasoning for the decision, and we don't know their underlying biases which they could have, and this can affect many people in the gaming industry. And since we can't see the decision process, no one can actually check the right decision was made and whether they looked at all sides of the case or whether they were opinionated and biased.
Or where should the line be drawn between free speech and safeguard? Currently, the committee has a very restrictive line far on the side of safeguarding, with most content currently being blocked under broad and vague guidelines, which opt on the side of censoring. This allows Chinese officials who, in my opinion, wrongly censor ideologically opposing content by functioning like a black box with no official website or members list. There is no personal accountability to make sure that the choices are solely focused on safeguarding. An example of ideological censorship is the game Devotion, which was censored for a joke Easter egg that was offensive to the president of China. There is difficulty in making a compelling safeguarding case to censor this, but the committee is able to hide behind the broad guidelines about morality and thus violate freedom of expression.
About what we would think is the right and more ethical approach. So some of the ideas behind this committee are good and I believe should be followed elsewhere. Regulation can be a good thing if it's about protection of the audience and controlling how far game designers can go. But there must be a balance. You don't want to stifle innovation and creativity, prevent free speech, and hold a whole industry hostage. Now, the implementation of the committee and those who implement it are vital questions. We would have to operate in the best interest of the audience being the parents and kids, etc. We need to ensure those members of the committee who are not part of the gaming industry are not financially rewarded for the decisions they take. So no members or family members of this member can hold shares in the gaming industry, otherwise they would work to their personal gain. It also needs a clear process for decision making, so detailed and written down, and if a game is rejected, it must be known to the company and public as to why, and there should be a process review to see how effective this process is and ensure it has worked as intended later on. It needs to have guidelines published depending on the age rating the game developer is intended for, and these should be widely available to the public. It should involve members of the audience to get a wider spread of data or opinions on the matter. I also believe the committee should be made up of medical practitioners, psychologists, experts in online video games, and members of the industry. Members should be from different backgrounds to provide an open-minded decision-making process with many opposing views to provide the best possible outcome. Now, to ensure the least amount of ethical controversy, both the decision process and its members need to be made available to the public. The committee should not have the ability to abuse its power, and decisions should be able to be challenged by bodies or the public. I would implement an RFC, a request for comment, by a deadline. An independent arbiter should be incorporated in case someone would want to challenge these decisions. This independent body would be responsible for hearing cases and making proposals to submit back to the committee. The independent arbiter cannot overrule the final decision of the committee, but can reject the arguments for a refusal and tell the committee to reconsider. All these members should follow the same guidelines as the BCS Code of Conduct. And finally, it should operate like the justice system within the US.
Thank you for listening to our talk on China's Games Ethics Committee rejecting many titles.